I'm Eve Vogelstein, the president of Great Talk. Welcome and thank you for joining us for another virtual conversation for sharing ideas with the very best minds. I'd like to thank Great Talk Gold sponsors, the Zaf McKinney Group at Morgan Stanley and LifeBridge Health for their financial support. And a big thank you to our partner, the Alexander Grass Humanities Institute at Johns Hopkins University, for making tonight's discussions possible. A special thank you to our media sponsor, the Baltimore Sun, and our in-kind sponsor, the Baltimore Fishbowl. Our Great Talk was founded by our executive director, Claudine Davison, and our vice president, Diane Davison, two very impressive women. The two of them make it all happen behind the scenes. Their dedication to this talk series enables all of us to enjoy these types of educational programs. Great Talk is an all-volunteer nonprofit, and we depend on donations to continue to make these programs available for free, like tonight's program. Donations are tax deductible, and also you could sign up on our mailing list to be notified when the recording of tonight's panel conversation will be available on our YouTube channel, and be notified about future talks, both available on our website, greattalk.org. It is now my pleasure to introduce the director of the Alexander Grass Institute of Humanities Institute, William Egginton, who will introduce tonight's panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Eve. Thank you, panelists, for being here, and welcome everyone to the first Great Talk of the Fall 21 semester. I'm delighted that you've all showed up for this important discussion, and I'm sure it will be a fascinating evening. Great Talk tonight deals with the future of global money. And to that end, we have a stellar cast of panelists. I'm going to begin by introducing all four of them, and then I'm going to go right into a series of questions. The way the evening will run is my panelists will discuss the questions as long as they wish to. I will intervene at certain times, add new questions, continue the conversation. I also invite everyone in the audience to throw questions of their own in using the Q&A function on Zoom. I will curate those questions and suggest certain lines of questioning to our panelists, perhaps combining and consolidating when I see a possibility for doing so. So without further ado, I'm going to go to our panelists right now, beginning with Amy Cruz-Cutts. Amy is a nationally recognized thought leader and chief economist focused on providing strategic economic analysis rooted in practical business terms. Amy is the president and chief economist of AC Cutts & Associates, LLC. She was previously senior vice president and chief economist for Equifax and senior director and deputy chief economist at Freddie Mac before that. Next, we have Michael Hiltzik. Michael is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and author who has written for the Los Angeles Times for 3 decades, serving as a financial and political writer, investigative reporter, technology writer and editor, and foreign correspondent in Africa and Russia. His columns on economics, business, public policy, and politics can be found at the LA Times. His latest book, Iron Empires: Robber Barons, Railroads, and the Making of Modern America, covers the nation's history during the Gilded Age of the last 19th century. Alex Mashinsky is CEO and co-founder of Celsius, the centralized cryptocurrency lending platform. Alex is also one of the inventors of VOIP, Voice over Internet Protocol, with a foundational patent dating back to 1994, and he's now working on MOIP, Money over Internet Protocol technology. Over 35 patents have been issued to Alex relating to exchanges, VOIP protocols, messaging, and communication. Finally, we're also joined by Lee Reiners. Lee is executive director of the Global Financial Markets Center at Duke Law. At Duke Law, Reiners teaches fintech law and policy, as well as seminars relating to financial policy and regulatory practice. His broad research agenda focuses on how new financial technologies fit within existing regulatory frameworks. His work has examined the risks associated with cryptocurrency, derivatives, the rise of digital investment advice, and corporate governance failures within the financial industry. So thank you again to all four of these panelists, and I'd like to start right with the grist of the matter and perhaps the basics for my own sake and for that of many in the audience today. My first question would be this: what exactly is cryptocurrency? How does it work? And what, in a day and age when it seems that the vast number of transactions don't involve physical currencies at all, what distinguishes it from run-of-the-mill e-commerce? Starting with the softball, who can start up for me?
I'm happy to jump in.
Thank you, Alex.
Well, let's start maybe with what currency is, and then we'll talk about digital currency. So currency is a medium of exchange, something that serves, instead of us doing barter with each other, you have a chicken, I have cheese, can we trade one for the other? We can basically use some other medium that allows me to exchange my chicken for whatever dollars or some other form of a currency, and then I can use that currency somewhere else to buy something else, right? So we went from currency being denominated in gold or silver, like physical asset that actually carried its own value in weight in some kind of a commodity, to paper money. And now, like you said, in digital money, right? Most of dollars, over 95% of dollars in the world are digital dollars. They don't really exist in any physical form. So cryptocurrencies or digital currencies are a different form of that. It's something that lives in the digital domain. It runs either on public or private networks. And it basically adheres to certain rules, protocols, algorithms that basically make sure that there's no double spend. You cannot take the same value and spend it twice. And it's in most cases uses a Merkle tree or some other version of a blockchain where you can use effectively some form of a decentralized database to manage who owns what at any time. And we can basically control all that value in one way or another. Today, there's, again, tens of thousands of these digital assets, some better than others. Some come in the form of CBDC or central bank digital currency. Some are denominated by companies, like, for example, Libra by Facebook, or JP Morgan has a version. And some others are decentralized, fully decentralized version running on the internet. So
Thank you. No, that's a terrific primer. You also used, Alex, the term blockchain, and I would invite any of our panelists who want to talk a little bit about what blockchain is and how what it enables in cryptocurrency, because I'm sure that's something that our audience would also be interested in hearing about.
So I can jump in there, and Alex gave a very thorough definition. And I would just add, when it comes to money, you're right, William, that our money is already digital, but it's issued by sovereign nations. So we call it fiat currency, by decree in Latin, and that's why it's valuable. So the U.S. officially left the gold standard in the early 1970s. And so if you have a $100 bill in your pocket right now, the material that is used to make that is not worth $100, right? But you feel confident that you can exchange it and get something worth $100 because people ultimately trust in the state that's standing behind that currency. So who do people trust when it comes to cryptocurrency, right? That's the fundamental issue. And the answer is that they don't trust anyone, and they don't have to trust anyone because of the underlying blockchain technology that powers cryptocurrencies. So for the first time in history, we have the ability to transact, to send value from one person to another without the need for any type of intermediary, trusted intermediary. And so there's a couple of technical hurdles that blockchain overcame to facilitate this. One is what Alex mentioned, was the double spend problem. So if an item is digital, how can I ensure that if I were to send Bitcoin to Alex, that I also don't send the same digital item to Michael, for instance? And so there's this process called mining. We can get into the details if folks want. That ensures that doesn't happen. And then there's also a way for us to ensure that everyone on the Bitcoin network or the cryptocurrency network has the exact same copy of the ledger. Again, we all have to agree on the universal truth because we're not trusting any one party. We're trusting the system, and the system is blockchain. Again, it facilitates peer-to-peer transactions. We all agree on the universal record, and blockchain is what facilitates that. And so blockchain can transact in value. It doesn't have to be cryptocurrency. It can be title, for instance, to real estate. It can be collectibles. So we've probably all heard about the non-fungible token craze, the NFT craze. Again, blockchain facilitates digital scarcity. And so it can be any representation of value that blockchain allows us to transact peer-to-peer.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in here and just point out that when you put together what Alex has said and what Lee just said, I think you're putting, you have a sense of the distinction between cryptocurrency and fiat currency, real currency, even if it's in digital form. And these distinctions are really what give rise to the questions that have been out around Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies since the very inception, and that is to use the slogan that Neil Postman used to use about any supposed innovation is, what is the problem for which this is the solution? And I've been following cryptocurrencies for almost as long as they've been on everybody's radar screen. We're talking 7 years or so at least, and I have never heard a cogent answer to that question. So when we talk about the need for trustworthiness, that's a real gap in the cryptocurrency universe. When we talk about the supposed virtues of decentralization, I think we have to ask, what are those virtues? What are those virtues? Are they real? And Alex, for example, runs a centralized exchange, and he basically talks about, and he and Lee have both talked about the double counting and double spending problem. And what that tells you is that what has to happen with crypto is that it's got to resemble real currencies much more than it does now if it's going to be accepted and actually play a role in the world of commerce, and which it doesn't at this point, as far as I can tell.
Amy, maybe
I'm happy to give a cogent explanation when you guys are ready. But
let me go to Amy first to ask a follow-up on this, and then maybe we can come back for Alex's cogent explanation. But Amy, do you also believe that perhaps there really isn't a need that the currency is responding to, or is that a little bit pushing it a little bit too far?
I think it's unfair to think of it that way. I am a skeptic. I don't participate in the cryptocurrency markets. I don't know who 20 years from now will be a winner out of all of these tens of thousands of models. But what I will say is this idea of blockchain and the idea of tying value with legitimacy or verification is a very large and, I think, underutilized today, or maybe untapped today, way of thinking about financial transactions or verification. So I'll put this more in the world in which I deal, which is think about what credit bureaus are, is a way of saying that, that Michael Hiltzik is who he says he is, and that he is trustworthy. It's a trust mechanism. Well, but now you think about the ways you log into your bank account. You put in your name, your password, and then they ping your phone, right? And so in this way, what cryptocurrency has done is demonstrated very vividly the value of the blockchain idea in ensuring that something of value goes from A to B, and that we can trace the path, and we can value that legitimacy. So I think that more than anything else I've seen in particular is an asset value in the economy that's been created. I worry about all of the issues of money laundering or tax evasion and those kinds of things, which I think are critical and huge. Jurisdictions are huge. There's value that's being exploited, and I don't mean that in negative necessarily, but you think about countries, we mentioned earlier about this idea of fiat currency is only as good as the government standing behind it. Well, how good today is the government of Venezuela? And if we think about a country that's in a very tough situation, Afghanistan being another clear example, right? That the idea of being able to get away from the fiat currency of that country and store the value you might have of your assets can be very important to people in those situations. It's hard to imagine that same value in the United States.
In fact,
So,
Amy, if you don't mind me jumping in there, I'd like to
Sure.
come right back to you with this question, because that was the next question on my list was geopolitical concerns and opportunities around cryptocurrencies. And I wanted to refer specifically to this past summer, the fact that on July 19th, the Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen, convened the president's working group on financial markets to discuss stable coins, their quote, rapid growth, potential uses as means of payment, and potential risks to end users, the financial system, and national security. A month earlier, the National Assembly of El Salvador, you had mentioned Venezuela, but here's the example of El Salvador, approved a Bitcoin law proposed by President Nayib Bukele 3 days earlier, effectively establishing Bitcoin as legal tender and a national currency in El Salvador. In some ways, this was merely a case of building a path where people are already treading, obviously. As many country currencies are volatile and unstable, their citizens are opting to use cryptocurrencies instead of their own. So what are the potential consequences of this trend on a geopolitical level, which is where I think you were on your way to going anyway?
So I think this is an interesting test case, El Salvador being the only country to date adopted as a national currency. As yet, in the past, when especially smaller countries have essentially used the dollar or the euro or some other dominant currency as their own currency, they've been at the whim of the central banks of those currencies. So when the United States Federal Reserve Bank engages in monetary policy, it can whipsaw the finances of these small countries that are using the dollar as their currency. And so cryptocurrency becomes attractive in reducing that volatility. However, they also lose a little bit of their independence when it comes to using cryptocurrency of ways in which they can stimulate their own economy. So if we think of the other purposes of the Fed, besides being the central bank, the engaging in monetary policy within the United States is to stimulate or to slow down the economy in various ways and try to minimize inflation and maximize output. So those two, that dual mandate there becomes more complicated. But again, a country like El Salvador is already, I don't know how effective
they were claiming, right? The president was claiming this as part of a process of de-dollarization, of moving the economy away from a dependence on its money's attachment to the U.S. being pegged against the dollar. Right.
Can I push back? Can I push back on that? Because that's I think the El Salvador situation is a bit of a farce, frankly. First of all, the El Salvador adopted the U.S. dollar as their currency in 2001, so they've already forfeited monetary sovereignty. Okay, so this is not as a significant a move as I think many in the crypto community would make it out to be. Second, the Bukele government has already been called out by the U.S. State Department for abuses of the rule of law, of effectively taking over the judiciary there. Along with this law, they have sort of created a state-backed sovereign wealth fund that is at the discretion of the Bukele government to allow citizens to convert their Bitcoin into U.S. dollars. And there's speculation that they're certainly just going to use this to kind of raid to fund themselves, but the implications for Bitcoin adoption more broadly in terms of stability is big, and I think it's underappreciated. So we know, for instance, that the Bitcoin was used by Russian nationals to fund their election interference activity in 2016. It was actually part of the Mueller investigation. Most people don't know that. We also know that Russia and North Korea and Iran are using cryptocurrency to bypass US sanctions. So in the US, the dollar's status as the reserve currency of the world and the primacy of the New York financial sector gives us tremendous benefits, us meaning US citizens. So it makes interest rates lower. It allows us to leverage our financial sector as an instrument of foreign policy. So if Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies were to legitimately take off as a medium of exchange, and I share people's skepticism, Michael's skepticism that will actually happen. But if it were, it would certainly undermine not just the dollar, but our ability to conduct foreign policy and just our supremacy as a financial center of the world here.
Yeah, I'd like to just pull on one of the threads that Lee just mentioned, and that is the association of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general with essentially criminal activities. We've seen Bitcoins, I know Lee has written about this, that you probably wouldn't have the ransomware problem that we have today without Bitcoin. And I think it's sort of underappreciated how devastating that sort of association can be to a new technology. And I would just point to, for example, nuclear power. Nuclear power, almost since its inception, has been associated with nuclear proliferation. Whether that's fair or not, that's what it is. And that contributes to the reluctance to expand nuclear power generation. I mean, it's not the only reason that we have this skepticism about nuclear power, but it's an important part of the reason that we don't see that technology having been expanded and accepted. To the extent that crypto is associated with criminal activity, that's the reason that we've got skepticism at the SEC. That's why we have skepticism at the US Treasury. And until that issue can be solved, and that requires crypto basically showing that it's valuable outside basically subterfuge, it's simply not going to be accepted or acceptable in the commercial world.
Alex, I think I saw you wanting to jump in there.
I guess I'm the only defender here of decentralization of freedom of so let me just give you one example. The last 10 years, the largest banks in the world were fined over $240 billion for infractions related to money laundering, illicit activity, you just name it, right? And so when you talk about Bitcoin being used for illicit activity, I laugh because in 1 year, HSBC paid more fines just for their dealings with the Mexican cartels, laundering money for the Mexican cartels, and all the fines that were ever levied by regulators against Bitcoin. So for every dollar that you can mention about Bitcoin, I can show you $1 billion worth of illicit activity with dollars. So saying that that is the reason, or that should be used as a mechanism for and not using Bitcoin is I'm sorry, but that's a joke, Well,
that's not quite the point.
I'll let you speak.
Oh,
Please
sure. No, go
finish.
ahead. Finish.
Let me
your thought.
finish.
Sorry.
So you can use a hammer to build a house. You can also use it to break a window. That doesn't make the hammer good or bad. Bitcoin is not the source of good or the source of bad. Bitcoin is just a technology. The problem that we're having is that 76% of all the dollars that ever existed in our history were printed since 2009, since the financial crisis. Bitcoin is a result of that. It's not the cause of any of the things you're talking about. So when you have just in the last 12 months, 40% inflation in monetary terms, 40% of all the dollars ever existed were printed in the last 12 months. And you don't think that that is a catastrophic negative event for the US dollar as a reserve currency. And that's why hundreds of billions of dollars or trillions of dollars are flowing out of the dollar and into digital currencies. Then you have to really re-examine your facts. So the issue at hand is not, is Bitcoin good or bad? The issue at hand is that the United States, and I'm a proud American, right? I'm a citizen of this country. I'm saying this with a lot of pain. The United States weaponized the dollar. The United States has used the fact that it's a global reserve currency to effectively subsidize tens of trillions of dollars in deficit. And today, the United States is the largest debtor in the world by far in history. There's never been anyone close to owe as much money to the rest of the world as the United States. So those are just few examples of the things that are causing Bitcoin and Ethereum and other assets to be so popular. It's not because crazy people are buying NFTs or because people that don't understand anything are throwing their money at Bitcoin. That is not the cause, that's the result.
The result. Thank you, Alex. Let me go to Michael, then maybe Lee and Amy can follow.
Right. The point that I was making, and just to expand on Alex's point, is not that dollars, sterling, what have you, can't be used for criminal activities, including by central players in those markets. It's that when you look at dollars, when you look at sterling, when you look at the euro, you can see the virtues of having currencies that have that sort of stability and that sort of market understanding of value. The problem with Bitcoin is that you don't have that evidence. In other words, you know, as I said at the outset, you still can't point to what it's good for that standard currencies are also not good for. So, you know, that's really the problem.
Yes,
it's a reputational problem.
I can do it in one sentence.
Okay, one sentence, and then let me get some reactions to that sentence.
I can do it very simply in one sentence. So if you plot the dollar against Bitcoin, the dollar lost 99.999999% of its value against Bitcoin, which means Bitcoin is a much better store of value. That's the only purpose of Bitcoin, is store of value, than the dollar. Why? Because the dollar, one Bitcoin is still one Bitcoin. It just used to be $1 to buy a Bitcoin, and now it's $50,000 to buy a Bitcoin. So the problem that you have is not in, is this a good cryptocurrency? Is it a bad cryptocurrency? The challenge is that because you're printing unlimited amounts of dollars, and more people are choosing to get away from that denomination, get away from the dollar denomination, you have an increase in value in an asset that has limited supply.
Thank you. Let me go.
So let me jump in.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, so I agree with Alex to an extent. So certainly cryptocurrency enthusiasts are very much attracted to cryptocurrency because of what they view as excessive monetary policy on behalf of the Federal Reserve. You hear this argument quite a bit, but I have to respectfully disagree with Alex that Bitcoin is somehow a better store of value. Certainly, if you look at the dollar compared to the yen or the euro, it's very stable. We saw in April, the price of Bitcoin went down by 50% in a matter of weeks. And that's the fundamental problem that cryptocurrency has when it comes to being used as a medium of exchange. There's only going to be 21 million ever Bitcoin put into circulation. That's in the code. Alex is obviously right on when it comes to that. But the problem is that any asset with a fixed supply has always historically been very volatile. And if you're a merchant, right, in El Salvador, for instance, why would you accept payment in Bitcoin when the very next day it could go down by 10% or 20% because Elon Musk sent out a dumb tweet, right? It's never going to be used as a medium of exchange. It's never going to be used.
I didn't say the words medium of exchange.
Well, you said store of value.
Store value and medium of exchange are two completely different things.
Or
Well,
let's
not
get to that.
connected.
So the definition of money, according to the economist, right? An economist would say money fulfills three functions. It's a store of value, it's a medium of exchange, and it's a unit of account, meaning that you can measure
That's a
the value.
currency. That's not money. Currency is what you just said. Money,
Currency
Cur-
clears credit accounts, right? That's the
money,
definition of money.
money or hard money, whatever you want to define, those are two different things. Money, like gold for me is money because it has limited supply. It's actually not issued by any government and it carries its own value, just like Bitcoin. It's
Most people would think of money as something that you can use to buy and sell
We-
goods and
we use
services.
that in-
I'm going to go
we
to
use that
Amy. Amy's been
interchangeably
waiting
in the
for a
English
while.
language.
So
We
I'm
use it
gonna-
interchangeably in the English language, but actually currency, the US dollar is a currency. It is not money.
So I'm going to go to Amy now and get her perspective on this.
So I would respectfully disagree that money and what you describe as the cryptocurrency or Bitcoin is really more like a commodity. Gold is a commodity. It is not money. It's an element, right, of the 100 some odd elements that we have in the world. So when I think about money, I really do think of this as the same way it was described, as a medium of exchange, a store of value, and a unit of account. That's a very important thing. I think that Bitcoin suffers from not only this idea that it can be used to buy things in this way that I can spend Bitcoin to buy things, but it's also an asset. And as an asset in that way, it has, in my mind, become a bubble. That people are buying it because they've heard people are making lots of money in the cryptocurrency market. And so if I get in now, I can flip my money around and make a profit. That's no different than tulip bulbs, to
Look,
my mind.
let me,
So-
first, I agree with you 100%. Bitcoin is a horrible form of payment.
Actually,
Like,
Alex,
no
can I
one-
ask a question that follow directly to you that will actually build on precisely what you two are
Let
talking
me
about
just,
right
just
now?
say
Yeah,
the
finish that
sentence
up, and then
to-
I think I've got a question that could
Yeah, it's
follow.
a very short sentence. So
Mhm.
the US dollar is a phenomenal form of payment. It's a horrible store of value. The Bitcoin is a phenomenal store of value and a horrible form of payment.
Mhm. Mhm. So you're agreeing that it's more of a commodity
Yes.
in that sense then.
I'm
That's-
agreeing that it's store of value. I keep saying the word store of value, and we're arguing, is it a form of payment? It is not a form of payment. I agree with everybody that it's a horrible form of payment.
Well, let me ask about that distinction a little bit
Think
more
about it this way.
specifically.
Let's think about it this way. If you bought a Tesla from Elon a year ago and you paid in Bitcoin, it is now worth 3 times as much. Instead of paying 50,000 for your Tesla, you paid 150,000 for a Tesla. So
right.
you feel horrible about it because you hate driving a Tesla because it's cost you 3 times as much as if you used your fungible dollars to pay for it. So
all right, well then let me ask this question, which was really about precisely thinking of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies as investments. So a lot of confusion then remains, certainly among people like me, about trusting and understanding Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. So would you say, panelists, so all of you, and I imagine I'm going to get some different answers here, but are such currencies a good investment? How do they compare as investments with equities or bonds, more traditional kinds of investments in terms of volatility, return, and safety? Who wants to take that?
I'd like to take on that question in a couple of ways. First of all, obviously, the volatility of the Bitcoin price is an issue for investors. I take a little bit of issue with Alex's remarks a little bit earlier that people are flowing out of dollars and into Bitcoin for one reason or another. The total value of the entire crypto market is about 2.2 trillion, of which Bitcoin is a little bit less than half that. If we compare that to other investments, the S&P 500 is valued at $38 trillion. Gold, the gold market is about 12 trillion. So that's 6 times the size of the crypto market. The bond market is about $128 trillion. So crypto at this point is still sort of a sideshow. If the entire crypto market went to zero tomorrow, it wouldn't cause a ripple in the world investment universe really at all. One of the things, since Alex, I think, led a little bit with his chin by mentioning Tesla. I think Tesla's overture some months ago, when it said you can buy one of our vehicles with Bitcoin, sort of points out the problem with thinking of Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. And I think we're now in agreement that, it's not really. But when Tesla was accepting Bitcoin for its products, the rules that it imposed were that when you put down your order, you had 30 minutes to close that deal if you were paying in Bitcoin. And if it took 31 minutes or 35 minutes, you had to start from scratch with a new price, basically a new assay of what the value was that you were putting up for that car. And even in those terms, Tesla's venture to accept Bitcoin didn't last for more than a few months, at which point Musk basically abandoned it. And of course, when he abandoned that, the price of Bitcoin, went through the floor, which is, one reason you want to be wary of Bitcoin as an investment, because it's so vulnerable to sort of the emotions that come from basically promoters or denigrators or what have you.
So in terms of the
statistics in the last year is, and it's not my statistic, you can do Google search, is that the NASDAQ is more volatile than Bitcoin in the last 12 months. NASDAQ has more volatility.
That's not true.
Well, look it up. I
Yeah,
didn't come up with the numbers.
Well,
So-
people can look it up
so-
and it's not true.
Exactly. People can look it up. So saying, look, I obviously Bitcoin is volatile. No one is saying it's not, but thinking that the stock market is not volatile, look at the last 2 or 3 years. So the issue is not volatility. The issue is asset allocation. And the issue has nothing to do with the size of this market or the size of that market. Okay, the best performing asset in the last decade, bar none, not even close, no one is even close, by an order of magnitude, is Bitcoin.
So
Bitcoin,
a quick
Bitcoin is
follow-up.
up several
on-
million %. The best
A quick
performing
follow-up,
asset.
Alex, on something that all of you do seem to be in agreement about, which is that as a medium of exchange, it has serious problems. Nevertheless, it seems to be greatly desired as a medium of exchange, in particular by people engaging in illicit activity. And I'm going back to this in particular because some of our audience members have been asking this question about the traceability, the following of the money question, and whether the fact that it is being used as a medium of exchange has primarily to do with the utility that it can serve for dealing with, shady dealings. Let's put it that way. Who can talk to me about that?
So I work with at Celsius. We actually work with all the agencies, FinCEN, Secret Service, the Southern District. I've been included in many transactions. Sometimes we have to go to them. Sometimes they come to us. We file SAR reports just like any other bank. We file suspicious activities and other things. The worst thing a criminal can do is to try to do an illicit activity on Bitcoin. Why? Because it's a permanent record. And frankly, the head of the CIA said that. I don't have to say it. The head of the CIA stated that actually this is the best way we have to track criminal activity and bring people to justice. So because while activities through banks and financial system, especially if those are not done through the dollar, are things that we cannot really control. Anything that's going through the Bitcoin, we have a permanent signature, not just of the on the blockchain, but also the networks themselves. Right? You can track the IP addresses, you can track the computers and the systems that were involved. And as we know, many criminals have been brought to justice again and again, doing so. The criminals who used HSBC to launder billions of dollars have never been brought to justice. The criminals who used the Danske Bank to launder $600 billion for the Russian mob were never brought to justice.
So if in fact, so the shall we say the commonplace understanding that someone like myself might have, that one of the attractions of a cryptocurrency is the crypto part of it, then we were probably misattributing that. But the idea that it somehow is secret, hidden, untraceable in a way, Lee, is that not necessarily the case? Is that not what's attractive?
No, it's the case. So, I mean, the evidence is very clear that the primary use case for cryptocurrency as an actual medium of exchange is for illicit activity. I mean, there's a ton of data points that prove this out. Again, I've already referenced the Mueller report, right? 12 Russian nationals were indicted for using cryptocurrency to fund their election interference activity, buying servers and whatnot. We also know that cryptocurrency, as I said, is being used by North Korea to bypass sanctions. I think Michael mentioned ransomware. Okay, where I live here in North Carolina, you couldn't get gasoline for a week after the Colonial Pipeline hack back in May. A few days later, the JBS meatpacking plant was hacked with ransomware, and meat production shut down in this country, and beef prices spiked. All of these ransomware hackers, the exclusive ransom that they're asking for is Bitcoin, is cryptocurrency. Okay, yes, ransomware predates cryptocurrency. I acknowledge that, but it wasn't the plague that it is right now.
So I was also thinking of that, Lee, and then I remembered what was reported shortly thereafter, that in fact my expectation at the time had been, okay, once this is paid, no one's ever going to find them, because again, with my idea, cryptocurrency is crypto and hence untraceable. And then apparently the CIA, lo and behold, traced it. And I wondered how that happened, and did that kind of give the lie to the notion of it?
Here's an article by Forbes magazine listing the United Nations doing a global survey, saying exactly the opposite of what you're saying. Okay, the same study by the FBI and by the CIA saying exactly the opposite of what you just said. So anyone with an internet connection can just do a search for illicit activity using Bitcoin and find out that, again, there are specific currencies like Monero and others that are trying to be more, what do you call it? Untraceable. But if you're using Bitcoin or Ethereum, our NSA or our CIA or our FBI will find you in a few minutes.
That's just not true in every case. Look, the proof is in the pudding. If cryptocurrency wasn't useful, why are they asking for it? Okay, why aren't ransomware attackers asking for debit cards, prepaid debit cards?
Look,
right, they're exclusively asking for cryptocurrency. Yes, is it traceable? You're known by your public address. It's only good for illegal activity, Alex. You know that. The only use case for illegal
Bitcoin
activity.
has 200 million users worldwide. So you're saying 200 million.
So is it a user or investor? You keep confusing things. So you say it's not a medium of exchange. You say, okay, it's a store of value. So users don't store value. Investors store value.
200
Is it users or investors? You keep changing your story here.
Last points here, and then I want to go to a new topic where we're getting
200 million people worldwide have invested in Bitcoin. Okay,
it's more of an investment from your perspective.
They're all investors. They're not paying for their drugs. They're not paying for their Teslas. They're just saying, I want 1, 2, 5% of my asset not to be denominated in dollars.
That's fine. I agree. The average person, if they're in crypto, they're in it for investing. I completely agree.
So, but the people who are using, you just said the main purpose
for as a medium of exchange.
No, the main purpose.
Yes. Okay.
The main purpose is investment. That's the main purpose. You're missing the point.
But the main purpose as a medium of exchange is illegal activity. The majority of people are investing in it. Yes, that
is not true.
I hear Lee saying as a medium of exchange.
Even as a medium of exchange. I'll give you an example. If you go on any
last example, then I got a new topic to go to. Okay.
If you go on CoinMarketCap and you look at transaction volume, you will see that the largest volume of transactions of people buying and selling these assets is done in stablecoin, and the volume just in USDT and USDC is greater than Bitcoin and Ethereum put together. So saying that most of that is illicit activity is lunacy.
So
you're talking about over 100 billion a day worth of volume. So you're saying most of that is illicit activity.
So Alex just mentioned something that I had as well in one of my questions, which was another concept that I think could be used some elucidating. And Amy, can you talk to us a little bit about the distinction or lack thereof between cryptocurrency in general and stablecoin, and what possible benefits are there to stablecoin?
Yeah, so stablecoin is backed by another asset, and it's dollar denominated, or it's got a currency behind it in that sense. So when you think about Bitcoin, Bitcoin is limited in its total issuance, and that distinguishes it from the stable currency. So the stable currency piece, we can issue as many as we want as long as we have those assets behind it. Okay, so those are the two fundamental differences in them. Both of them use this idea of a blockchain technology and so on, but and they are in their own denomination, whatever unit that might be.
Mm-hmm. So stablecoin in that sense, once you've taken away this notion of this is just something that's going to, there's only going to be 21 million of them out there no matter what, and it's completely detached from anything. Once you've taken away that distinction, isn't it really functioning just more like a purely digital version of what I called in my initial question just e-commerce, digital dollars? What would the distinction?
I think it looks more like that, or more similar maybe to even a stock, right, or something like that, because there's this backing behind it.
Let's talk about how it's. Yep, go ahead.
Go ahead, Alex.
Now, I was just wanted to explain how stable coins are created, right? So let's take Paxos, which is a company that issues stable coins, right? So you have to give them not a physical, but you have to give them a digital dollar, right? You send them an ACH or a wire transfer. They're a new NYDFS trust company. They, by law, have to either buy treasuries with it or hold it in cash in a bank. And when they hold it, they then issue a token, right? So the one US dollar enables them to issue $1. They cannot issue two. They cannot do fractional reserves like banks do or anything like that. So when you are issuing a dollar into circulation, the digital dollar, which is a stable coin, you are removing one digital dollar or regular dollar from circulation in the traditional system. So it's not like a bank that basically could create money through the issuance of debt. This is all the issuers who are issuing stable coins must receive one of the regular dollars to issue a token representing that asset. So there's no inflation, there's no double spend, there's none of those things. Now, the reason the regulators are very concerned about this, and the reason the Fed and the Treasury and everybody else has met to discuss all these issues, has to do with the plans of the United States, because the United States as a country and as an issuer of the reserve currency has to decide, are we going to look like China, issue a CBDC, issue something that is issued by our central bank and controlled by our central bank, or are we going to allow multitude of different issuers of these stable coins to effectively compete in the open market against each other? And that is a very tough decision. It has nothing to do with Bitcoin. It has nothing to do with what's happening in the crypto industry and everything else. It is using cryptography. It is using this or that blockchain. But the issue at hand is really, what is the next version of the US dollar as a reserve currency going to look like? And are we going to go with a centralized Chinese-like infrastructure, or are we going to allow our economy to, through competition, to come up with the best next version of the dollar?
So there are a couple other pieces to add to the concerns around stable coins. Alex mentioned Paxos. There's another popular stable coin here in the US, USDC, US dollar coin, which is issued by Circle in collaboration with Coinbase. And certainly with Paxos, he's right that it is backed one for one for US dollars, but most stable coins are not. In fact, the most popular stable coin is Tether. So Tether, there's approximately 80 billion in circulation. Alex mentioned CoinMarketCap. You can go there, you can see that the majority of transaction volume in crypto is done via Tether. And crypto investors like stable coins because it's how they trade in and out of their crypto positions. It's very hard and cumbersome to transact from fiat to crypto and vice versa. There's a lot of pain points. It takes time. So stable coins provide the benefits of cryptocurrency without the volatility, right? That's the whole premise of why these things exist. And in fact, it's an implicit rebuke of cryptocurrencies as a medium of exchange, the fact that we have these things. But Tether, we know, is not backed one for dollars. In fact, there was a settlement with the New York Attorney General that verified this. And as part of that settlement, Tether has to submit periodic reports on the reserves that are backing their tethers. In their most recent release, it was revealed that Tether is the 7th largest holder of commercial paper in the world. Okay, so they have commercial paper backing their reserve, and Lord knows what else. And they're actually in the news right now for trying to fight a Freedom of Information Request Act from CoinDesk to disclose the credit quality of this commercial paper. So these start to, when you look at it, these start to look a lot like money market mutual funds, which are short-term, which are investments that invest in commercial paper, other short-term instruments. And there's a history of money market mutual funds blowing up during financial crises, including most recently in March. And the Federal Reserve has had to step in and support this market. So I think policymakers are really concerned around the risk that stablecoins pose to financial stability. They, like I said, they look like money market mutual funds. Is the Fed going to have to backstop them? These are essentially deposit-like instruments. You put $1 in, you expect it to get $1 out. Well, what if there's a run on Tether? And then they have to liquidate. So there are real risks. It's not just, Alex is right that there's China. We have to figure out what we're going to do. What does the future of the US dollar look like? But stable coins are a big, big risk to financial stability. And that's what we're trying to figure out, is how do we address that?
So let me pick up on Lee's answer there to sort of formulate an overall question about risk. So you're pointing to the risk to the stability of financial systems as one potential downside, and the need to think about regulatory mechanisms to safeguard against that. What other risks can be associated with either stable coins or cryptocurrencies in general? Some of our audience are raising a completely different set of concerns. Are there valid concerns around the amount of energy, the carbon footprint, for example, of cryptocurrencies? This is something that people are raising my awareness about right now as we're having this conversation. What are your thoughts about this? The sort of plethora of possible downsides, and what kind of regulations would need to be brought in to create appropriate safeguards for them? Who wants to grab that? Michael, I haven't heard from you in a little while.
Yeah, just today in the Financial Times, there was a report from an interview with Gary Gensler in which he said, look, for crypto to play any significant role in commerce or the world markets, it's going to have to come under regulation. Or the platforms cannot survive. And the risks, I think, there's just a multitude. And we've seen this play out. Crypto wallets can be hacked. Passwords or seeds that you need to access your funds can be lost. And the extent to which owners of crypto accounts, the extent that they go to protect their passwords from memory loss or just pure loss is almost comical in their elaborateness. There's no government backstopping. There's no government protection against the failure of crypto platforms like we have the FDIC or SIPC or what have you. And of course, there's no recourse. And what I always found interesting is that crypto proponents talk about how the great thing about crypto transactions is that they're irreversible. In fact, when Musk was taking Bitcoins for Tesla automobiles, he made sure to make the point to buyers that if you are paying us with Bitcoin and your payments go astray for one reason or another, they get paid to the wrong recipient or what have you, that's your problem. We're not going to make it good. We're not going to care. We're not going to look for it. And the fact of the matter is that the idea that you don't have an intermediary in a Bitcoin transaction, so that's good, is exactly the opposite of what consumers and I think merchants want to see in a market. They want to be able to reverse a transaction that's gone wrong or that's fraudulent or they haven't received something they've paid for, or the money has gone astray. The essence to security in financial transactions is an audit trail. And the
Accountability,
idea
right?
that, the idea that you don't have that with Bitcoin is not a virtue. It's a problem for the average consumer. And even merchants who are told, well, nobody can do a chargeback of a transaction that you've accepted in Bitcoin. That's not good for the merchants, because the merchants are also in many ways consumers. They have vendors, they have suppliers, and if they make a deal with a vendor and they can't get what they paid for, they're now in the same boat that the rest of us are. So there's risk. The issue with Bitcoin and crypto is that the risks of this market and of this commodity or asset have been portrayed as virtues, and for the average person, they are not. They're just the opposite.
So I would like to comment on this. In 1994, I was working on Voice over IP, and I remember AT&T explaining to me how we needed them as an intermediary. They kept explaining that the whole phone network, they were the largest carrier in the world, and that people talking to each other directly was dangerous, and the internet was this thing that no one controlled. And unless there was an intermediary that charged us $3 a minute for video calls on ISDN, and we couldn't really talk to anybody, right? That was the way to do it. And here we are using Voice over IP, the technology I created, without any intermediary. There's no one in the middle between us, from my IP address to your IP address. And we're doing phenomenally well. The entire world is living without it. Actually, our economy would not survive if we did not have this technology today because of COVID and everything else. So just because we needed an intermediary in the past for the last 700 years of banking, doesn't mean we need an intermediary in the future. So the future is here, but to use the future, you need to leave the past behind. And
well,
unfortunately,
I don't know about that.
Well, I live in the future. I can tell you, as a visitor from the future,
IP,
as a visitor from the future, I can tell you that in the future, all transactions are going to be done. Most transactions are going to be done without an intermediary. And it's not because Bitcoin is so great. It's because the banks have abused their powers. I'll give you one simple example. Banks have reported, all banks in the United States reported all-time record profits, okay? At the same time, they're paying their depositors the lowest interest they've ever paid in their history, okay? So on the blockchain, Celsius, my company, pays 8.8% yield on stablecoins, on USDC for the last 4 years, 8.8%. How much are you getting paid by your bank? So tell me who's telling the truth and who's lying to you. Is the real value of money 0.1%? Or is the real value of money on stablecoins 8.8%? That is really the question you have to ask yourself. And that is why $2.2 trillion have left the regular economy and have joined the future, because in the regular economy, all of our activity now is controlled by the Fed, controlled by Treasury, and it is not representing the true value of money. 0.1% is not what you should be earning for $1 for an hour of work or a day of work or a month of work that you put in.
Well, let me ask the other panelists who want to respond to that, and then I've got another question. Who would like to respond?
Jump in. Yeah, I'd like to jump in.
Go.
Yeah, so yes, it's true that 10 basis points is not much of a return on a deposit in a bank. However, that dollar that's in the bank is not going to lose 50% of its value overnight. It's insured by the FDIC. So as a store of value, it's there. You can go back tomorrow and get it. That's important.
Stable coins don't lose their value, right? Stable coins,
well, they haven't yet, but
you can go back to Paxos, you can go back to Circle and
hold on, Alex. Let Amy finish up her points, okay?
But much like was described earlier, I think that the idea of these being very similar to a money market fund or similar, but without the regulatory protections, what really is the value behind Bitcoin other than the fact that we have all come together to say that the value of the asset is rising? Well, is it guaranteed to rise tomorrow? Is it guaranteed to be there in 3 weeks? And what happens when the first one of these fails and people lose their money in those accounts? So, 8.8% in this environment is too good to be true. To me, it sounds like a Ponzi scheme. So I don't buy into that. I go back to Michael's original question of what was the problem that we're trying to solve? Commercial paper is a valid instrument. It comes with risk, but it's a valid instrument. We have many other valid investment instruments out there, whether it's an equity or a bond or a savings account. There are lots of other assets. Real estate is another asset. Gold is another asset. So what's the problem we're trying to solve? And to me, I don't see how the problem it's trying to solve by being backed by these commercial paper or treasury assets is really creating something that wasn't already existing before, except that you pile on the next guy's investment dollar. So I worry about that.
If you take your dollar and you put it in Paxos, it's 100%. U.S. Treasuries, that's better than your bank. Your bank doesn't. What does your bank give you when you make a deposit with them? Do they give you U.S. Treasuries as collateral? The Federal Reserve now requires zero collateral by banks, zero. So all these companies we're talking about have 100% collateral in U.S. Treasuries or cash equivalents, 100% collateral, right? So you're arguing with me over what's better. Your bank has zero in reserves. The Fed has lowered the requirement from 10% to zero. So if you want to compare those two, I'm happy to talk about it all day long. But again, we're not talking about Bitcoin. We're talking about US dollars, just US dollars, converting them from your bank to something digital, and them, because of the velocity of money, the velocity of money in DeFi is 20 times higher. These are not my numbers. You can Google that and see it. 20 times higher than they are in the traditional markets. Okay, and because of that, the value of money is much greater, or people are willing to pay much higher interest for the same dollar if you deliver it to them in the digital form. This is not Bitcoin. This is not Ethereum. It doesn't lose 50% of its value. It just earns 8.8%, having 100% collateral behind it.
We have some interesting questions coming in that seem to be germane to precisely this debate. So someone asks, if cryptocurrency, if it seems to be the case, as you all seem to be agreeing, that it's best to think of cryptocurrencies more as assets for investment, whether one thinks they're a good investment or not, versus a store of versus a currency, right? In the traditional sense, it sounds like they ask, we would still continue to need traditional money. In other words, right? If we're really supposed to be thinking it as a store of value that one invests in or that one buys, more like a commodity than a currency, don't we still need currencies? I mean, that's an interesting philosophical question that I wonder if you all can help me parse out.
Well, I'm not sure that commodity is the right way to think about it. I think maybe collectibles is the right way to think about it. An asset that's got sort of a built-in scarcity, and that's worth what participants in that particular market decide it's worth. And and sure, it can go up, but it can also crash. For all we know, Bitcoins will just fall off the table a week from now, like Beanie Babies did. There's just no basic value that the cryptocurrencies address in the real world. There's no there's no account that they value. I mean, I know Alex says, well, there's been 40% inflation in the money supply, in a matter of, I don't know, years or decades. But I know what a dozen eggs will cost in dollars, and once in a century, we might see hyperinflation in some communities where you can no longer count on that. But we haven't seen 40% inflation in the last few years in anything that we tend to buy, certainly staples that are denominated in dollars. So
listen, obviously we're still going to need fiat currency, and think of what Alex has been talking about for the last 20 minutes, right? Which is fully reserved stable coins. So all you're doing is exchanging $1 that you had in a FDIC insured bank account for a digital asset that is not insured, but is still tied to the dollar, right? You're still caught up in the same monetary policy system. Stable coins rely on dollars in bank accounts. It is integrated with the US dollar. In fact, it needs the US dollar. So fiat currency isn't going anywhere. And we keep talking about crypto as an investment, but we haven't talked about what's the valuation methodology. Why is it an investment? All right, so we think of stocks and bonds, they have cash flows and we discount those cash flows to the present value. Well, of course, there's no cash flows with cryptocurrency, so that we can't use that method. How do we value other currencies? Well, we value them relative to one another based upon things like inflation, interest rates, GDP growth in the two countries. Well, of course, that doesn't apply to cryptocurrency. So where does that leave us then? Well, I'm not entirely sure. At the end of the day, an asset is worth whatever people are willing to pay for it. And narrative plays a critical role in the cryptocurrency ecosystem. You've seen that on display with Alex tonight. Banks are bad, invest in crypto. Inflation is bad, invest in crypto, right? That's the narrative that's emerged.
I've not said any
Yes,
of those
you have.
things.
You've said that repeatedly.
No,
HSBC,
said-
yes, you have. You
I
said the
keep
same thing.
saying-
Don't deny it. The video's out
I
there.
keep-
People can watch the recording. You've said the exact thing, Alex. Don't deny it.
So let me say
So
it
why
again,
is
if it wasn't
crypto worth
clear.
anything then? They say it's digital gold. In fact, it's better than real gold because real gold exists on asteroids, and maybe someday we could mine asteroids. And I'm not making this up. The Winklevoss twins put this out in a blog post. All right, there's only going to be 21 million Bitcoin ever in circulation. So it's a digital gold. Well, why is gold valuable? All right, it's valuable because we can actually use it for other things, for jewelry, right? Gold has also been a historic hedge against inflation in the broader stock market, right? And so that's why they seize on this inflation argument. The problem is that there's no data that backs up this relationship that somehow crypto and Bitcoin is a hedge against inflation. When inflation started to emerge in April and May, what happened to crypto? It tanked in price. The moment we actually saw signs of inflation for the first time in 20 years, Bitcoin tanked. So there's no relationship whatsoever in the data between inflation and crypto. So the only reason it's valuable is because there's a narrative that says it's valuable. Amy said this earlier, right? Invest in crypto because you can sell it at a higher price in the future. Every single financial bubble in history has been accompanied by a narrative. Look at 2008. Housing prices never go down, right? They've never go down on a nationwide basis, despite the fact that they had in the Great Depression. So social media plays a role in perpetuating this narrative. And that's why, whenever you say anything negative about crypto, the hive mind sets in and attacks you because how dare you question, right, the prevailing narrative. And look what happened when Nassim Taleb published his Bitcoin black paper, right? They tried to cancel him, but they couldn't. And his whole premise was that this whole thing only works if miners will be there always and forever, maintaining the database. If you think that at some point in the future, miners will go away, then you need to discount the value of crypto now to zero. All right, gold will always be valuable, whether or not there's people out there mining it. The same cannot be true for crypto. So crypto is a bubble. There's no there, but it's valuable because people like Alex believe it's valuable and they spread the word.
All right, you
Like,
done?
perhaps a rebuttal from you and then go to Amy and Michael after that.
Sorry?
To you, Alex, and then
Yeah,
after you
thanks. So,
yeah, to
so
Amy
look,
and Michael.
the fiat currencies, there were just over 700 fiat currency in the history of humanity. All of them, without exception, went down to zero. All of them were debased to zero. If anyone thinks that the US dollar has some kind of magical power or special staying rights, the US dollar as a fiat currency is an experiment. It's only a 50-year-old experiment since 1971. Bitcoin is another experiment, but that is a 12-year-old experiment. Now, I've never said, and I'm happy to say it right here, that I actually object to anyone putting all of their assets or all of their money into Bitcoin. That's stupidity, okay? Each person has to decide what is their asset allocation based on their age, based on their income, based on their risk tolerance, and so on, so on. And each person has to decide. The problem that we all have is that 100% of our value of everything we create, doesn't matter if it's our home or savings or a bank account or anything else, is denominated in dollars. So again, in the last 12 months, the US government and the Fed have printed over 40% of all the money that ever existed in the last 12 months. So the fact that you haven't seen inflation yet, it doesn't mean anything. I can look in the back mirror in my car and see nothing there, but I'm going to crash into a wall. The fact that there's nothing in my back mirror doesn't mean where I'm going. So looking at the past or looking backwards when we didn't print 40% of our money in 1 year means nothing. So what all of us have to decide is how worried are we with the fact that the Fed has put a safety net under the US economy worth $3.6 trillion. And then our government decided that printing 4.6 trillion is nothing. And we spend trillions of dollars on wars that we can't afford. We have over 120 trillion of unfunded liabilities.
What does this have to do with crypto?
So all of this has to
Why
do
is crypto
with
better?
the debasement. All of this has to do with the debasement of money. So each person has to decide, how does the fact that my government is taxing me 50% and then my Fed, the Federal Reserve, is debasing my currency to zero, how is that going to impact me? Do I need to take some of my asset, 1%, 5%, 10%, or 20%, and put it in a non-dollar denominated asset? The only options you have for non-dollar denominated, and I mean non-fiat denominated, right, are gold, silver, Bitcoin, or equivalent. That's what each person has to decide. Okay, so this
Amy,
is
let me
not
go
a
to you.
discussion. This is not a discussion about 100%
No.
or only Bitcoin. This is not a discussion
What about baseball
currencies
cards?
going
You can put it in
away.
baseball cards too, or you might as well go to Vegas.
Let
and put
me
it on
ask
black.
let me ask Amy now, from the economist's point of view, does it make sense to say that because of the threat or the possibility of inflation, that something like a non-fiat currency makes sense as a safer investment?
Well, I'm not in the camp to believe that the Fed has overplayed its hand, or that we're going to see Fed-induced inflation. I think there's much more in play right now that's affecting that. But that said, what is the right investment? Well, he's arguing, I think Alex is arguing, you should put it in commodities. He's listed commodities, and that's a fine investment vehicle if that's where your tolerance is. But I don't believe that Bitcoin, although it's defined as a commodity, is really a commodity. I can make not only jewelry from gold, but gold is used in electronics. It's used in dentistry. It's got value in the things we make and use in our daily lives. Same with silver, aluminum, any of those other commodities. I can't make anything out of Bitcoin. It exists only because we agree that it has value today, but tomorrow we might decide that it really is something that is ethereal and not real, and the value goes away overnight if people get spooked enough. So to me, it's not solving that problem. But the thing that I kind of want to go back to with Alex's point earlier about voice over internet protocol, what cryptocurrency has brought about is this discussion about truth and how we might transfer this legitimacy of one asset being transferred to another, and that the blockchain technology and the demonstration of its value, I think, will be here long after Bitcoin or some other current cryptocurrency is around. So there's value here, but I don't believe it in the asset.
Let me ask a question about that value, and maybe Michael, this is something that you could also speak to. With all of us accepting, or were we to accept, that at least there's some value of the kind that Amy has pointed to in the technology itself, doesn't that raise the question of accessibility of this technology? So to what extent, to the extent that technologies like this are adopted, to what extent is accessibility to broad sectors of society going to be, or already becoming, a problem? Is the fact that not all of us have the same bandwidth, accessibility to the same bandwidth, the same kind of levels of technology, does that create a problem for equity in terms of cryptocurrencies?
Well, that's a good question. And, the idea that maybe Bitcoin itself is not the point, but the blockchain is a real advance, is a real innovation. I mean, that was the narrative or the received wisdom, or it has been for a while. We just have not seen applications for blockchain technology really take off. And, I think accessibility, for the average person, you would get it if the blockchain was really, a value, a technological value. You would see it being used by banks, by governments, maybe, in the foreign exchange markets, and the average person would gain access to it through those intermediaries. And I since I mentioned intermediary, I want to just ratchet back a little bit to the points that Alex was making about VOIP being a technology that doesn't require an intermediary. And I don't know about that. I mean, I've used VOIP for years, but I've always done it through a vendor of one sort or another, whether it's Vonage or Time Warner or what have you. I don't have a system where I can just dial up another VOIP user. I have to go through some sort of agency, a commercial agency. And the reason that's good is that when my VOIP connection goes bad, or I'm not getting a dial tone, or I'm not getting what I want, I call Vonage, or I go to Vonage and I say, fix this. And they'll either fix it, or as happened, they will lose my business. And I'll move on to somebody else. I mean, I don't have a landline anymore, but I do have 2 VOIP lines, but they're through an intermediary who I can address to say, this isn't working right. You are the technologist, you fix it. So there's that. And the last point I'd make is that we've had this discussion now about value. How do you value a currency, or how do you value a store of value? Alex has posited the idea that, like gold and silver and what have you, Bitcoin is a hedge against inflation. And he talks about inflation that we can't see in the rearview mirror, but is looming up ahead. All we know is that through every recent inflation scare, as I think Lee pointed out, gold and silver and all these other inflation hedges, and in fact, crypto, have not performed the way we would expect if they really were genuine. First of all, if there was really fear of inflation, and second of all, if they really were hedges. They simply have not gained in value to the extent we would expect if there was a real threat of inflation looming. So you have to ask, first of all, do we not have faith in the Fed or the other central banks in sticking to their targets, their stated targets for inflation, 2%, 3%, wherever they want to put it? If we don't have faith, then yes, we're in trouble and we need a serious hedge. But the recent history of currency values tells us that the dollar, for example, has been based very much on the full faith and credit of the United States. And when that looks to be impaired, that's when we have a crisis of currency value. That's when the S&P downgrades the creditability of the United States. It's because there's some political issue that puts in question the full faith and credit. We may even run into that in the next couple of months. But by and large, the value of fiat currencies, as Alex would put it, is that we trust the fiat issuers to understand what they need to do to protect that value. And thus far, they have done that.
Thus far, 700 out of 700 fiat issuers have all debased their currency to zero. That is the history lesson that we all seem to want to ignore. It doesn't matter if it's the British Empire or the Germans before World War II, or the Byzantine Empire or the Roman Empire, you name any empire, and I will show you how they debased their currency to nothing, couldn't pay their armies. That was the end of the empire, 700 times in a row. We are just the last experiment as a reserve currency of the planet. So, and by the way, you're using Zoom. and it has nothing to do with your Vonage provider, who's your internet provider. So you don't need one to have the other, right? These are completely independent services. You can talk to
Actually, it
anybody.
is through my internet provider.
Your Vonage is your internet provider, but it has
No,
nothing to do
no,
with your
well,
VoIP.
yes, but
your VoIP
Time Warner is
connectivity.
my internet provider, and that's how I get access to Zoom.
I know. That's why I'm saying it has nothing to do with your VoIP connectivity. They don't decide if you are connected or not connected, who you're connected to, and so on. You can use any VoIP application. I can use one, and you can use another. We can still talk to each other because we all use a global protocol that I helped develop 30 years ago. So
some of our audience have been asking me to go back at least one more pass through this question of potential hidden costs of this kind of technology in terms of carbon footprints. Is it a fact that digital coin is energy intensive to mine, or is it in fact less? Would an economy that would be entirely based on something like cryptocurrencies be in fact less carbon expensive?
It's true. I mean, not only is there no there when it comes to crypto, but it's actually exacerbating the climate crisis. I mean, this is not activity that's displacing other economic activity, right? This is only existing because coins are valuable and people make money by mining them. So the problem is with the proof of work coins, and this gets into how do you achieve consensus? How do you get millions of people who don't know one another or have any reason to trust one another to agree on the universal truth? So you have to have this energy intensive mining process. We don't get into the details. And so yes, that energy is coming from very carbon intensive sources. Coal-fired power plants. This is one of the reasons that China has cracked down on cryptocurrency mining. Now there is there are if you want to keep this going, I mean, there are alternatives available. So there's proof of stake coins that are less energy intensive. So it doesn't have to be the case that cryptocurrency is environmentally harmful. There are ways to lessen that impact, and Ethereum right now is attempting to move from a proof of work consensus mechanism to a proof of stake consensus mechanism, but it's very hard, and there's a lot of governance challenges when it comes to managing a decentralized network. But certainly, there's like University of Cambridge has a website, the Bitcoin like carbon tracker that folks can see, and I think right now it's the Bitcoin mining uses on an annual basis the same amount of electricity as Sweden, I think, right now.
So the out of over 11,000 tokens and coins, and 97%, I think, are using proof of stake and not proof of work. So it's true that Bitcoin and until basically early next year, Ethereum are using proof of work, but that is a transitory technology. So just like we used to have a steam engine, and we can say that okay, we needed fire to run the steam engine. That doesn't mean that we're still using it today. So
Alex, can you quickly explain that distinction? I know Lee was just mentioning it as well, and maybe people like myself in the audience don't quite understand the proof of stake versus proof of work.
So proof of work, which is what Satoshi Nakamoto invented when he created Bitcoin. That was the crux of the invention. One of the most difficult computer science problem in the last 70 years, right? He solved the problem that millions of the best minds did not manage to crack, right? Which is that double spend problem. He solved it by basically dividing the responsibilities by people that are using the network and the people that are protecting the network. The people that are protecting the network are effectively running specialized computers whose job it is to guess an answer to a very complex question, and the computer randomly that manages to get that answer gets a reward. The reward is right now it's 6.25 Bitcoins. It used to be double that, before there was double that, and so on. And the reward is effectively you're mining the reward, or you are minting new Bitcoin that was locked before that. So and that mechanism provides for that diversity So no one can collude with somebody else to take control of the network. So that's proof of work. Proof of stake is using a much smaller number of nodes, and you have to stake coins. For example, you're going to have to stake Ethereum like Celsius does, and you're going to have to, by staking them, you're risking, if you're trying to cheat the network or you're trying to manipulate the network is going to confiscate your assets. So you're not using a lot of electricity, you're not using a lot of network. So it's a million times more efficient. It's not 2 times more efficient or 5 times more efficient. So proof of stake as a solution for basically consensus across billions of users costs less than any, it will cost 1/1,000,000th of the cost of running the Visa or the MasterCard network. So it's a much more efficient mechanism, and it's distributed, and it's cryptographically proof secure. So and Visa announced that they are migrating to this technology. So this is not just so there's no, I don't think there's a dispute over where are we going. I think most banks already use the multi-party computation, which is a form of cryptography, which is using all this technology that we just talked about. So the issue is more about and almost every bank, definitely every major bank in the United States already announced that they're going to be offer Bitcoin and crypto services to their clients. So there's no question that this is an asset class that is now one of the assets that people need to have. And the question remains is how much each person has to allocate for themselves. And that has to do with, if you believe that everything is great and there's no risk of inflation and the United States is doing great and there's no problems, then you should have zero allocation to it. But if you believe that there are issues, proof of work or proof of stake is not really the problem that's going to hold you up from getting Bitcoin or getting Ethereum or investing in stable coins.
So listen, I promised the organizers that I would wrap us up by 8:30, and we are now rapidly approaching that time. So I want to slowly bring us to a close and begin to do so by really offering my sincere thanks to all 4 of our panelists this evening, Lee, Alex, Amy, Michael. This was really a scintillating conversation. I can't tell you how much I learned about something that I've always been curious about. And I really, in 1 hour or an hour and a half, I feel that I've got a seminar's worth of information and perspectives and debate. So my great thanks to all of you for sharing your expertise and intelligence on these issues. Thanks as well to Shira Dingle, who has been the backbone of having this both the great books, great talk every time we do it here at the Alexander Grass Humanities Institute. She's behind it. And of course, Great Talk itself, the brainchild of Claudine Davidson and the entire team, Eve and Diane at Great Talk Inc. And thanks to all of you and all of you who tuned in this evening for this great discussion. I really appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thanks for
everybody.
having us.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Take care, everybody. Good night. Bye-bye.